I'm Kyle Witt.
And I'm Isaiah Smith.
And you're listening to 95.3 The Highlight.
On WGUR 95.3, broadcasting live from Milledgeville, Georgia, and also on GCSUradio.com.
What's up, guys? We're back with it for another exciting week of WGUR The Highlight 95.3. It is Super Tuesday. And Isaiah, who would you take as the first-round pick if you had to pick one of these candidates?
Oh, goodness. I don't know if we're talking about for the White House or, in sports.
No, let's talk about sports.
All right.
Who athletically would you take as your first draft?
Oh, goodness. It's not something I've really thought about, but, none of the guys really strike me as too good of athletes. But I guess I'll go with, Rubio maybe. Seems like a younger guy, maybe a little bit more athletic. Maybe Ted Cruz, a little athletic too. But I'm going to stick with Rubio. How about you, Kyle?
Yeah, he looks pretty agile, swift on his feet. He looks pretty confident too. I think he'd do well in interviews at the combine this year. But let's get into it. Let's talk some NFL football. Let's talk the real guys. There were some great performances over the weekend, but Isaiah, who stood out to you the most?
One guy who I thought did very well, and I'm glad he did very well, is Keith Marshall. A lot of people were wondering, what this guy could do coming off the knee injury and not getting a ton of reps last year. I think that may have been, a good thing for him to kind of save his legs and save his body. But, a lot of people are wondering now if he can be the next Bulldog who was, mediocre, kind of underperformed in college, if he'll be the next guy to succeed in the NFL. And he had the measurables. I mean, a 4.31 40-yard dash, fastest, one of the fastest at the combine, and he was one of the best guys on bench as well at the running back position with 25 reps. So he definitely, pushed his draft stock up, answered a lot of questions about what his knee was going to do, how he was holding up, if, the lack of reps would make him rusty or anything like that, and he definitely showed that it did not. And another guy I thought, Will Fuller, a guy who some people thought, borderline second round, maybe could slide into the first round if the right team maybe traded up or, some other things happened ahead of him, but he posted a solid 40 time, had the second fastest, I think, behind Keith Marshall, and, he looked pretty good in other drills too, so that's always a positive for a guy like that. He definitely solidified that he is one of the better guys in the draft, and he is a talent deserving going early in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, back to Keith Marshall real quick. I mean, you're right. There's been a number of Bulldogs throughout the years that have, kind of maybe underperformed or really not lived up to their potential at the University of Georgia, but have gone on to be great football players in the NFL and to be very successful. The one that comes to mind at the running back position is Terrell Davis. Wins 3 Super Bowls with the Denver Broncos. Could never really scratch the starting depth chart at University of Georgia, but obviously had a great NFL career, long prosperous NFL career. So hopefully Keith Marshall can do the same and keep this running back university tradition going at the University of Georgia. But one guy I looked at as a guy that really had a top performance at the combine was Jalen Ramsey. I know he was kind of in that top 5 group, but I think he may have vaulted himself to be a potential top draft pick this year, the number 1 draft pick. A few weeks ago we said that there's no way the Titans would pick anybody but Laramie Tunsil, but after this week I think Jalen Ramsey proved he's the top overall player in this year's NFL draft. He's far and away the best cornerback in this draft, and on the field and in a combine setting, and a lot of NFL teams think that they could plug him in at safety or cornerback and he could start from day one. So he's a guy I would look for in these coming months to be reportedly the top draft pick.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of draft boards now that are saying that he could be the number 1 overall pick, and a lot of experts are saying that the Titans really should look to Jalen Ramsey as a possible guy they're going to take with that number 1 overall selection. But he really did well for himself. He stood out in the vertical and the broad jump, 60-yard shuttle, really showed off his athleticism, I feel like. And also, if you run the tape back on this guy, he really does have the ball skills to possibly play safety and corner for a team in the NFL. So that's always a great thing for a team to have that versatility with a guy you take with a first-round pick and even maybe a first overall selection. So going forward, looking at the combine, who do you think improved their draft stock the most, and who do you think hurt their draft stock as well?
Here's another guy that maybe really didn't need to improve his draft stock, but for me, I've been very hypercritical of him. So I think, in my eyes, he definitely cemented his draft stock and proved me wrong. And that's Carson Wentz, the quarterback out of North Dakota State. He sure did rock the combine, and he looked every bit the part, measuring in at 6'5", 237 pounds. He ran a 4.77, which is pretty impressive of a guy who's supposedly going to be a pocket passer in the NFL. And, most of all, he apparently killed his interviews, which is huge out of any position, but especially quarterbacks. I mean, that's what you want to see. A cerebral guy, a guy that can be a leader, a guy that can step in. Even though he's a rookie, he can come in and show that he's got the smarts to compete with the veterans, and he can hang in there with the best of them. But another guy also on the offensive side of the ball was Ezekiel Elliott. A running back, a position that's kind of been undervalued here in the NFL recently, but I think Todd Gurley kind of helped him out a little bit, showed the NFL, the running back position still is valuable. It can still really help you out on the offensive side of things, especially if your quarterback is a little bit young or a little bit inconsistent. They can provide some stability. Ezekiel Elliott, he already was, he surpassed expectations at Ohio State, running for 1,800 yards twice in his career, but at the Combine, what he did most of all that really helped him out was dazzle in the interviews, and he supposedly has the highest football IQ of any running back that certain scouts have ever seen. So I think that's pretty impressive, and I think he's going to skyrocket up draft boards pretty quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Very, very impressive from those guys. But, my top guy, we already talked about him, was Jalen Ramsey. Obviously, showed that he was probably one of the best players in the draft. And then, looking at the quarterback position, Jared Goff, he was a guy that a lot of people thought would slide down draft boards, maybe come in behind, Paxton Lynch and some other guys like that. But he really showed that, he may not be better than Carson Wentz, but he can definitely hold his own. This weekend, I think they said that, he really solidified his draft status and his stock as being, the guy that is right there with Wentz, or definitely right behind him, if not, ahead of him. And also, looking to the other side of the ball, Darren Lee on defense, a guy who a lot of people had, late first round, maybe second round coming in, but he really kind of jumped up draft boards in the past weeks, and definitely this weekend solidified that, I think, as well. And right now, a lot of people have him going at 17 to the Falcons ahead of Reggie Ragland and Robert Kimdichie and guys like that. And so I think that's, huge for him, obviously, and it gives the Falcons some other options as well. I'm a little bit happy about that as well. That they have some options and some more guys they can look to possibly to help improve this team and go forward next year in 2016.
Yeah, so some guys that hurt the draft stock. I think, one guy right off the bat is Jalen Smith. We talked about him not competing. He did attend the Combine. He weighed in at 20 pounds under what he was at Notre Dame. But, it's also looking like he's not going to play next season, according to certain doctors. And also, I think that there's a chance that he might not ever play again. I've heard that his knee is as bad as Marcus Lattimore's, and we saw what happened with that. So that would be pretty disappointing to hear out of the Jalen Smith camp, because he is such a special talent. He would be the top outside linebacker and possibly linebacker in this draft. I think he's falling down boards quickly. We'll see what happens with him. If he could potentially show some progress, maybe the end of this month, right before this draft, maybe he could get picked up. But it's looking more like he may fall out of this draft altogether if he can't. If it's looking like he may never play again. And then another guy also on the defensive side of the ball is Vernon Hargreaves out of Florida. He had a very respectable Combine, from a drill aspect, but what hurt him the most was his measurements. He was already being heavily scrutinized for his size, but over the weekend he measured in at 5'10", and his arm length was in the 20th percentile. So, NFL coaches are already especially hesitant with these kind of measurables. Receivers are so big and fast anymore. He does have such an outstanding skill set that I do still think he'll be picked up in the first round, but I don't think he'll go in the top 10 like we once thought.
Yeah, definitely. Jalen Smith was my top guy as well, a guy who didn't participate like we said, but there's the speculation concerning the knee that he could miss all of 2016, and like you said, may never play again, and that's just awful coming from a guy who, like you said, maybe the top linebacker in the draft and maybe a top 5 pick if he's healthy. And another guy who I think didn't really hurt himself. He came in measuring the way that everyone thought he would, and a guy who a lot of people were really high on is Robert Kimdichie. But the one thing that he really kind of didn't do was just kill the interview portion. He kind of referenced the incident right here before Christmas where he had the marijuana possession charge. He fell out of the window in Atlanta, and the teams brought that up, obviously asked him about it, and he didn't really own up to it or take responsibility. He kind of threw some of the other guys who were in there with him under the bus. He kind of just kind of blew it off as if to say, there were other people in there, it wasn't all on me, somebody just had to take the fall, and it happened to be me. So that's not the type of guy you really want in your locker room, a guy who's gonna kind of throw blame around and shift it around. And if it's something that he did do, especially from a leader leader, a guy you're going to look to possibly be a leader on your defense going forward. I just don't think that's the type of guy you want in your locker room. So I think that hurt him maybe a little bit more than the measurements and all the freakish athletic ability did him good this weekend.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of comparisons to Randy Gregory last year. A guy that had first-round talent, originally thought to be a top 5 talent overall, fall all the way into the second round. That looks like the type of deal that Kondichi is going to have to deal with. If he can't really mature pretty quickly, we talked about it before, he might have a similar career to Johnny Manziel, a guy with all the tools, all the talent in the world, that really couldn't put it together because he couldn't get it together mentally. But we've talked about guys who improved and guys who have kind of hurt their draft stock. So who remains stable this weekend, though? Who kind of didn't do too much to impress, but didn't do too little to kind of really just plummet the draft stock?
Mackenzie Alexander is one, a cornerback from Clemson. He didn't participate in the combine at all, so his pro day I think will be one of the only times that scouts will really get a look at him, and he'll probably get some other interviews that he'll have to come into as well for teams who are interested in him. But I think he's going to need a solid showing at his pro day with Jalen Ramsey looking so good, and with Hargraves looking the way he did, looking like he has the skill obviously, but some of the measurements didn't quite come out like teams wanted him to. But if Alexander doesn't show up in his pro day, some teams could start looking over him and start looking at Vernon Hargraves. And then all the quarterbacks for me as well, nobody really set themselves apart. We're kind of looking at the quarterback picture the same way that we did from day one. We think Wentz is the top guy, Goff is in there, Paxton Lynch obviously right behind, and then there's sort of everyone else behind those guys. So I think that it's going to be important for Lynch, Wentz, and Goff to have really good pro days and show that they're still the guys that a lot of people thought they were. But no one's really set themselves apart. So a good or a bad pro day could really push any one of these guys into up into the first round, or move them up draft boards, or push them down into second, third round possibly.
My only guy, a guy that I think was just didn't do anything at all, didn't do anything to hurt himself, didn't really do anything to help himself, was Laquan Treadwell. He did compete a little bit. He got in on the broad jump and the vertical leap, did pretty well in that, but he didn't run a 40. And I think a lot of teams are thinking he's injury prone. He has first round talent. He has the ability to be maybe a Julio Jones or a Calvin Johnson type receiver, but if he can't stay healthy, he's never going to reach that potential. And I think he's got to prove to these NFL scouts on his pro day that he is healthy and that he can stay healthy. And he may not be able to do that on his pro day, but he's got to at least prove he's healthy and that he's making progress and he's going to be able to play this next season, because receiver's a position that a lot of teams look to put these guys in at rookies, throw them into the fire. It's not too hard of a position. I mean, yeah, a lot of them, they got to fine-tune their route running and different stuff like that, but, it's basically just catching a ball and, blocking a little bit. So, Laquan Treadwell, he's a guy that if he can have his stellar pro day, he will be in the top 15 picks in the draft. If not, he may fall out of the first round altogether.
Definitely. So looking a little bit forward here, we've already talked about some of the big name guys, the guys who everyone's excited to see, who knows, are going to be in the first round or second round type guys. But who are some guys under the radar that, caught your eye this weekend, Kyle?
You already mentioned him, Isaiah, was Keith Marshall. I know, a lot of us here close to home know about Keith Marshall, but, he's a guy that really hasn't been the same, according to a lot of people, since his freshman year. Broke out with Todd Gurley his freshman year, but then ever since that gruesome knee injury his sophomore year, hasn't been the same. He's been hearing all along that he'll never be the same back. He's not as fast. He looks hesitant, all this different stuff. Never quite regained his step, and didn't get the carries that he probably would have liked to the rest of his career at Georgia. But I mean, this weekend, he likely moved himself from an undrafted free agent to a 6th or 7th rounder. I mean, he ran a 4.31 at 219 pounds. That's insane. It was the fastest 40 of all running backs. And then he put up the most reps on bench press of any running back at 25, which is 3 more than Heisman Trophy winner Derrick Henry. I mean, come on, that's pretty impressive. That's a guy that shows he's committed, that he's prepared, that he worked very hard for this combine. Obviously, he couldn't prove it on the field, but I think he proved it in this combine that he's more than capable of being a running back in the NFL.
Definitely. My guy, is a defensive guy on the other side of the ball, cornerback from Ohio State, Eli Apple. He's a guy some had, late first round, and, some, had in the second round. They said he, was maybe too small, some other small intangibles like that. But this is a guy, he really showed up on his pro day. He performed very well, and now some people have him in the first round. A lot of people have him in the first round. He's really flying up draft boards since his workout the other day. So I think he's a guy who could really come in, help make a difference, especially if Mackenzie Alexander isn't the guy we think he is in his pro day. If some teams are, scared away by Vernon Hargrave's size, he could, in some people's minds, be the second cornerback right there behind Jalen Ramsey from Florida State. So I'm definitely interested to see how this guy, looks in his pro day and looks going forward, and if teams are willing to take a shot on him.
All right, so last little bit on the combine and these NFL rookies. First of all, what position group are you most excited after this weekend to watch in the NFL? Watch these guys perform as rookies and see them progress throughout their NFL careers.
I think I had two groups really. Everyone's excited about quarterbacks, running backs, but for me, honestly, I'm ready to see the defensive linemen and the defensive backs. Defensive linemen, defensive backs too. They become in two groups who are getting a lot of love in the salary cap market. They're getting paid. These guys are getting paid. Look at J.J. Watt. Other cornerbacks are getting paid as well. Other defensive linemen. So I think Jalen Ramsey, Vernon Hargraves, two of the corners, Mackenzie Alexander, and then on the defensive line, Robert Kimdichie, Emmanuel Ogbah. If he can show up and be the type of guy that they want him to, that people expect him to be in the NFL. Sean Oakman's another guy who could be a huge defensive lineman. He's not a first rounder, but he's a physical beast, like we said before. And then even some linebackers who could show up and be really good. Joey Bosa, and we're missing two of the best, obviously, in Miles Jack and Jalen Smith, but we have some exceptional ones with Darren Lee, Reggie Ragland, other guys like that. So I'm really looking forward to a lot of those defensive positional groups, especially that front seven group.
Yeah, I don't think you could have said it better. It's really the defensive line, like you said, Joey Bosa, Shaq Lawson, DeForest Buckner, Noah Spence. I mean, the list goes on. And then you look down a little bit, and you still got Robert Kimdichie and Ashawn Robinson, two All-Americans, two studs from the SEC. They may not even be selected in the first round. So I think this is one of the most impressive groups of defensive line that we've seen in quite some time. I think they just keep improving and improving because, like you said, the defensive line is one of the highest paid positions in the NFL anymore. Everybody wants to get after that passer. Everyone wants to bully the offensive line and win the war in the trenches. So, I'm excited to see some of these guys, even some of these guys that, we're talking about may not have it all together yet, like Robert Kimdichie. I mean, his potential is probably higher than anybody in this draft. It's just a question of whether he can put it all together. But we're going to take a quick break real quick. We got some Radiohead with, they're going to play some Karma Police for you, and we'll be right back.
What's up, guys? We're back. We're talking a little bit more NFL football for you guys this week. So we're going to flip it over to some guys who are already in the league now. We saw some guys, get the franchise tag today and a little earlier this week and late last week. And we saw some contracts signed as well. So which one of these guys, Kyle, do you think means the most to their team?
I think you can't look past Von Miller. I mean, look what he did for this team all year long. Look what he's done for this team the past few seasons. He's really given them an edge on defense and really given them the speed that they need. He was a Super Bowl MVP, and he's the leader of that defense. And, you drafted him a few years ago as a top 5 overall draft pick. You drafted him to be your leader, and he's been that, and you want him to be that for years to come. You may lose a franchise player in Peyton Manning this year on the offensive side of the ball. I think it's crucial to keep him, it was crucial to keep him on the defensive side of the ball as, your leader and your defensive quarterback. So, there's a few other guys, Eric Berry, Josh Norman, but I think, I think Von Miller takes the cake.
Yeah, definitely. Von Miller was my top guy without a doubt as well. He's, an emerging superstar. You can say he's already a superstar now at defensive end, and he's the guy in Denver that they can't go without. I mean, he kind of is the quarterback of that defense, like you said, Kyle, and without him, who knows what that defense is, but with him, they're definitely a top 5 defense, this season, next season, and maybe for a couple years to come. A guy who I thought, is kind of a surprise that got the franchise tag was Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
He seemed to find his niche with Washington for a little bit this year, had a great stretch toward the end of the year, but really didn't, do too much in the postseason. And he, it's just kind of a one-year thing. He didn't really have a stretch where all year he was great, but he kind of, I guess you can argue, found his niche toward the end of the year, and he might be the guy for them going forward. But he does have a non-exclusive tag. That means he can negotiate with the other teams, but Washington will get a chance to match any offer sheet he gets. So that's good for them, I guess, because who else do you really have out there? I mean, Brock Osweiler maybe, Peyton Manning, an aging Peyton Manning at that, if he decides to retire but keep playing. Yeah, so I don't think Peyton Manning's a guy who can really help the Washington Redskins out. I'm not sure about Brock Osweiler or if they'd even be able to sign him. And, I think Kirk Cousins is the right move for these guys until you can maybe draft someone else in the next year or two and try to work some more youth into the system. But for now, I think Kirk Cousins is the guy they got to go with. And then Eric Berry as well. It hurts Atlanta. I wanted to see him in a Falcons uniform next season, but he's deserving of the payday that's probably coming his way in the next few months. And then Josh Norman as well. I'm interested to see how he can do in the second year of kind of his stardom and being a breakout player for Carolina, and if that defense can be just as good in the secondary with him kind of being the leader of it.
Yeah, those are some great points. I mean, Josh Norman, let's see if he's a one-year wonder, one-hit wonder, because right now, he was a lot of talk. He was great, he was a lot of talk. He was a lot of walk, but let's see if he can do it again in year 2. Let's see if he's, he can walk the walk once again. But then, with Kirk Cousins, I think, the idea was, hey, we made the playoffs with him. Let's keep some continuity. Let's see if we can get back there. We have some pieces. Let's pick up somebody in the first round that can add to this team. A guy that we're not going to have to rebuild around. So, they could have gone the route, hey, let's trade up and grab a quarterback, one of these quarterbacks, and make him the future. But I think they realize, Kirk Cousins has, plenty of ability left in his arm, and he's a guy that they can still build around. He hasn't even reached his prime, and they can pick up a guy in the draft and some guys in free agency that may help Kirk Cousins out, and they can build around him a little bit. But moving on a little bit, we mentioned it a little bit earlier. Peyton Manning. There's been rumors swirling all around. One report says he's ready to be done. He's on his way out. One report says that he's not done and that he wants to stay in Denver. Somebody else says that he's staying in Denver. So what's up with it, Isaiah? What's your opinion on this matter? Do you think that the Denver Broncos are done with Peyton Manning, and do you think they should be done with Peyton Manning?
The word is, like you said, that they're not rushing him. There's no timetable for a decision, and but that's just what they're telling the media. That's kind of the what they want you to think, what they want you to believe, to make it the beautiful story that it will be when Peyton Manning retires on or before March 9th. Because the fact of the matter is that on March 9th, that's his hard date to make a decision, I feel like, because that's when free agency starts. That's when teams can begin negotiating with free agents and other players and things like that. So the unspoken rule is March 9th, because if he says, I'm going to stay in the league, I feel like they're probably going to cut him, because he's the type of guy who, Peyton's he's a legend. He's a great, obvious, one of the greats, all-time greats, but he can't help your football team anymore, past what he did this season. What he did this year was special. He had a great team around him, but for the Broncos, I think it's time to move on from Peyton Manning, look elsewhere. I think for Peyton, it's time to move on as well. One hit the wrong way, one, fall the wrong way could, end, or not end, but could, affect the way he lives his life after football going forward. So I think that he will retire. There is speculation out that he's spoken with John Elway, and the word is that he's going to retire, but Elway's letting him make that decision on his own time. So I think that we're going to see Peyton retire by next week at the latest, because I don't think he wants to get cut and be the guy who ends up retiring on a free agent list or being a young guy's backup or something like that. Yeah. So I look for Peyton to go ahead and hang it up.
Yeah, seriously, what's the point? I mean, you just won a Super Bowl. Your arm is clearly giving out. Why do you want to see yourself get cut? Why do you want to see yourself go to another team and have to rebuild around them? Hold on, I might sneeze. Just kidding. I'm good. He either sticks with the Broncos, and I think Osweiler beats him out. I think the Broncos were about ready to hand it over to Osweiler this season, but they did realize that it was Peyton Manning's team. This is his last rodeo, and I think they made the right choice. I think down the stretch, Osweiler was not going to be the guy. I don't know if he could have beat Brady and some of that, but I think going into next season, it's got to be, hey, let's go with Brock Osweiler. Let's go with him all the way. He's our future now. Peyton, he gave us a Super Bowl. He gave us a few trips to the Super Bowl, and we're forever grateful of him for that. But it's time to move on, and it's time for Peyton to move on too. we don't want to see him be the next Brett Favre and get ridiculed for coming back, multiple times after retiring. I don't think that Peyton Manning has the arm left like Brett Favre did back in that day. I think Brett Favre still had more left in the tank. I just don't see it with Peyton Manning. Too many times this season, his balls were lame ducks. They were fluttering all over the place, and it really hurt the Denver Broncos at points. So, I think both parties need to go their separate ways. Peyton, ride off onto that horse, put your sombrero on, right into the sunset. Broncos, keep moving on. Go with Brock Osweiler. He's clearly a guy that you guys can move forward with and be pretty successful with.
Definitely. So moving back east a little bit here, Sam Bradford and the Philadelphia Eagles, they agreed to a contract worth $36 million over 2 seasons. Is Sam Bradford a guy who is worth this money, or is it going to be a waste for the Eagles?
I think it's a complete waste. I think it's time to consider Sam Bradford a bust. He's been injured so many times throughout his career. He's never proven to be a great NFL starting quarterback. He's more of a middle of the pack, or even less than that, maybe lower tier type NFL guy. I mean, I don't understand how you're going to pay him $36 million over the next 2 years. I think you could have put your money elsewhere. I mean, I understand you want to have a stable starting quarterback, but he's not a stable starting quarterback. He's really never proven to be a game changer. I know they're bringing in a new coach in Doug Peterson, and he's kind of a quarterback guru. He helped out Alex Smith in Kansas City, but I think Alex Smith is much more athletic than Sam Bradford, and I also think he has much more potential than Sam Bradford does, and he's also not as injury prone. So I just didn't really understand this move. I think there's a few good quarterbacks in the draft. I think maybe the Eagles should have traded up for one of them, or looked into something else, because I just clearly don't think Sam Bradford can get it done anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with the decision to sign him back, but not for $36 million. He's not worth $36 million, on his best day, let alone what you're going to get from him week in and week out in Philadelphia. In Chip Kelly's offense, Chip Kelly's supposed to be the quarterback whisperer, and his offense made, Mark Sanchez and Nick Foles look decent and serviceable at times, and they're not the best quarterbacks, obviously, but Sam Bradford looked lost at times this season. He's injury prone, like you said, and he's the guy who I think it's past time to consider him a bust. He is a bust. So I think, I don't agree with the $36 million move, but I kind of agree with signing him back simply because he can serve as a segue for Doug Peterson to kind of get a new guy in there, groom his new guy for a year or two with Sam Bradford being the quarterback, and then thrust this new guy onto the scene, and Doug Peterson and the Eagles can have a lot of success, and the success that, they're hoping for in year 3 or 4 under Peterson instead of, 1 or 2 under Sam Bradford. So I understand the move of bringing him back, but not for $36 million.
All right, another interesting roster move today out of Buffalo. Mario Williams, the former first-round pick in the NFL draft, was cut by the Buffalo Bills, and he's been to the Pro Bowl 4 times. Countless seasons of double-digit sacks. What do you make of this move, Isaiah? And we've talked about it a little bit. Could he be a guy that potentially ends up in Atlanta in Dan Quinn's defense?
I think so. There's a lot of people saying that if we're gonna spend a lot of money for some guys, obviously Bruce Irvin is one. And if Eric Berry's not there anymore, why not spend a little bit of money on Mario Williams' services? I mean, he has tons of potential, and he just never really came to be that player that a lot of people really expected him to be. But like you said, he has had seasons with double-digit sacks. He's been to the Pro Bowl 4 times, and he could enjoy something of a renaissance with Atlanta. I think he could help, Vic Beasley get after quarterbacks on the defensive line, and then imagine a front 7 with him, Vic Beasley, and then let's just pretend that the Falcons somehow take Kimdichie and then somehow slot up in the first round to go after Darren Lee or Reggie Ragland. That'd be intimidating. It'd be crazy, honestly. It'd be the best, I think, front 7 with the most potential, I think, that maybe the Falcons have had in the history of the franchise. So I think he'd be definitely a boost to the roster, and he'd help with the pass rush and probably stopping the run as well.
Yeah, I mean, a guy with 91 sacks, 91 career sacks, and like I said, 4 Pro Bowls. I think, he's at 31 years old. He reminds me a little bit of John Abraham when the Falcons picked him up. A guy that had really proven himself as a pass rusher, maybe aging a little bit, and his previous team decided to let him go. But that another man's one man's trash could be another man's treasure, and that could be true for the Atlanta Falcons. They may look to draft a defensive end or a defensive lineman in this draft, but Mario Williams could be that veteran that is plays opposite to Vic Beasley and maybe grooms him a little bit and grooms whatever defensive lineman they pick up in this draft. So I think that would be a huge addition for the Atlanta Falcons, and I would love for them to pick up Mario Williams.
Yeah, definitely. So moving back closer to home here, the Falcons, they're expected to go after Mohamed Sanu and Marcus Colston for some help in the receiver position. Probably some guys they want to play in the slot. So what are your thoughts on this?
I really like, I guess the attitude the Atlanta Falcons have this offseason. It sounds like they're finally getting into maybe that more win now mode. I think they realized after last season that they can compete, going 8-8 in Dan Quinn's first season, winning their first 5, being the only team to beat the Carolina Panthers in the regular season. They were impressive at times. They were very impressive at times and showed that they had some tenacity and all that. But it really came down to having the talent there, and it just simply wasn't there. We've talked about it so many times. Matt Ryan, over and over again, was just looking Julio Jones's way. He was looking that way every single time, and it just got to the point where other teams were, expecting it. So, adding Marquise Colston or Mohamed Sanu, these guys have been legitimate receiving threats for years in the NFL, and they would be, I think, in some offenses, I think Marquise Colston, with the Saints, he's been a number 1 option. Maybe he's aging a little bit, and maybe he's sliding back down to a number 2. But, I think he'd be more than capable, and I think he'd bolster the Atlanta Falcons offense immediately.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure about Marcus Colston. He's on the wrong side of 30. He's 32 years old. Was cut by the Saints, I believe, the other day, or was going to be cut by the Saints. He didn't pass the physical, then that's part of the reason why they cut him. But, he wasn't too productive in the offense last season, and they're an offense, that kind of only threw the ball, especially towards the end of the season last year after Mark Ingram went down with an injury. So, he could help. I think he does have the potential to help, but, he also has the potential, I think, on the other side of the coin to end up just like Leonard Hankerson, be a guy who we bring in, expect to give us a good bit of production, and then he kind of tanks toward the end of the season, and we end up cutting him, and it's just a waste of money. So I think Mohamed Sanu could be a different story. He's only 26. He's a speedy slot receiver. Could be kind of like Harry Douglas, do the things he did for us. He's never posted a 1,000-yard season, and that's one of his, I guess, the drawbacks of bringing him in. But he also never played for a quarterback as good as Matt Ryan, or had a run game as good as the one he's going to have with Devontae Freeman and a healthy Tevin Coleman. Andy Dalton, he's all right. He's pretty good, but I don't think he's Matt Ryan. So he did have Colston did have 800 yards in 2014, 5 touchdowns that season as well. But I think the youth could be a little bit better option for us there, so we can get him in, maybe keep him around for a little bit longer, and establish him here. Maybe he makes a career out of being the speedy slot guy to Julio and Roddy, and kind of taking over where Harry Douglas left off.
Yeah, he's already done it with A.J. Green in Cincinnati. He's already proven that he's more than capable. So I think he's a guy that Mohamed Sanu would be a great fit in Atlanta. I think the receiver talent, especially in the top half, is not great. I think the receiver talent is deep, but I think the Falcons are not going to look to pick one up in the first or even maybe second round. So, I don't see them getting any immediate help at that position. So I think they're going to have to look to free agency to get that solid number 2 guy for this season. But we're going to take a quick break. We got Purity Ring, and then we're going to talk some NBA basketball. What's up, guys? We're back with some more NBA basketball to talk about. We just passed the mid-season mark, and the Golden State Warriors show no signs of slowing down. They've already clinched a playoff spot. It's pretty impressive, and they're on pace to win the most games ever in a regular season. So we know we're gonna have to talk about it sooner or later. We've touched on it a little bit, but Isaiah, what do you think of the argument that this Golden State Warriors team in 2016 is as good or better than the '96 Bulls?
They're two very different teams, obviously, and I haven't done my homework on, the 95-96 Bulls, haven't looked at all the stats or, some other homework, which includes, playing with them on 2K as one of the classic teams or, catching a game on ESPN Classic or something like that. But, it depends on what rules we're playing under. Are we playing under the rules from the day? Are we playing under the rules from back then? I think that makes a huge difference. Under today's rules, I think, Dennis Rodman might play about 2 quarters for him, and, then he's out of the game in foul trouble. So I think that the rules will make a difference, obviously, but looking at this thing from an analytical standpoint, the Warriors are not soft. They can hold their own in a game played, with rules from the 90s against this Bulls team. I think it's a close game, and there's no real way to pick a winner, but I think, there's 2 words that are going to separate this Warriors team from that Bulls team, and it's Steph Curry and the 3-point shot. I think that, the Warriors, you can say they're a finesse team, but they can play finesse. They can play, power with the power that you can say they have. Draymond Green, he's their little bit of nasty that they have in their attitude. Their small lineup that they use to put teams away or to come back with, it's deadly. The 95-96 Bulls, they don't have an answer for that with Draymond Green playing the 5, and they don't have an answer also for all the quality depth that the Warriors have this season. Klay Thompson, Iguodala, Harrison Barnes, Livingston, Leandro Barbosa, they're all guys who you can throw out there on that wing position, and they can guard, Michael Jordan, can guard Scottie Pippen and do an effective job. And I think Steph Curry can do well enough on his coach and Steve Kerr and keep him from hitting deep 3-point shots against the Warriors. And I think that this year's Warriors team would beat that team, but it'd be a close game.
Wow, bold statement here from Isaiah Smith. The 96 Bulls had someone that was pretty clutch of their own. Michael Jordan, winning NBA championships with the flu. Does the Golden State Warriors have a guy kind of like that? I mean, we may have seen it this weekend with that 3-point game winner. Is he as clutch as Michael Jordan, and is he the most clutch guy in the NBA right now?
I think right now he definitely is. After we saw Curry hit that shot and LeBron missed a shot, I believe, the other night to tie the game in Toronto, I think that the argument leans towards Curry just based off of recent performance and what some people are saying right now. Curry, he's the type of guy, he's got ice water in his veins. I mean, he can score it from literally anywhere on the court. You've heard people say that about guys like Ray Allen and guys like LeBron. They can score in any way from anywhere. Curry, he embodies that. He can score from 2 feet. He can score from, it seems like, 52 feet. It doesn't matter where. So I think that, Curry is the most clutch player in the game, and if I have a last shot right now and I have to choose one guy to give it to, I'm giving it to Steph Curry.
Some more bold statements from Isaiah Smith. So the Warriors, we mentioned it earlier, the first team to clinch a playoff spot, potentially on their way to winning the most games in the NBA regular season ever. But, can they make it all the way through the postseason? We saw the Carolina Panthers in the NFL this year almost go undefeated, and then, they couldn't quite get there. They couldn't quite beat the Denver Broncos. Is that going to be the story in the NBA, or can the Warriors, overcome all this and overcome the hype and, the target on their back?
Yeah, I think the Warriors, they're a grounded enough team to understand and know that once you get in the playoffs, everyone's 0-0 again, and what you did in the regular season, it doesn't really matter anymore, and you got to win 16 games to get to hold the trophy at the end of the season. But with that being said, I said it once on here before, and I'm going to say it again. I don't think there's anyone that can beat Golden State in a 7-game series. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that can match the pace, the quality of the depth that they have, and I don't think there's anybody that can guard Curry and make him miss enough shots for Golden State to lose 4 games in a series. You might shut him down a couple times, 2 or 3 times in the series. You may even take it to 7. But I think Golden State, they're going to come out in a game 7 that's going to be on their home court, and they're going to try to take it to you, and I think they eventually will. But, with that being said, some people are saying, are there teams is there anybody who can match them? And I think there are a couple teams who can play with them. Oklahoma City showed that they could do it last weekend. Obviously, for the better part of 3 quarters, they played with Golden State, and they actually beat them. And I think that, if Kevin Durant doesn't foul out there at the beginning of overtime, just kind of a boneheaded play from him, I think. But if he doesn't foul out there, maybe it's a different game. Maybe, you see a different result on the final possession for Oklahoma City, or maybe you see a different, result defensively for Oklahoma City as well. That Steph Curry and Golden State aren't able to make shots down the stretch. But I think they're a team that can compete definitely with Westbrook's athleticism helping them out. Then the Spurs, they're playing, this Spurs type basketball, fundamental. I think they're just going to have to try to grind it out against the Warriors if they see them in a 7-game series. And there's no one in the East, I think, that's in the same galaxy with the Warriors, let alone the same planet. I mean,
not even the Hawks.
Not even the Hawks. The East is weak. Obviously, we've been saying that for the past 3-4 years, and I don't think there's anyone that can play with them. So if the Warriors make it to the NBA championship, you'll get a spirited effort from maybe a Toronto team, maybe a Boston Celtics team, or maybe even LeBron James and the Cavs. You'll get a spirited effort. Obviously, they have Golden State has a target on their back, but I think they'll hoist the trophy eventually.
All right, let's talk a little bit about LeBron James and those Cavaliers. It's the team who the Golden State Warriors beat in last year's NBA Finals. They seem to have some major problems, though. I guess you touched on it a little bit, Isaiah. LeBron is carrying this team right now. Can he continue to carry this team? And if he is, are they a legitimate threat at all?
He's going to continue to carry this team, obviously. It's the type of player he is. He's the type of guy, he's not just going to roll over because things get a little hard or a little bit difficult. But with that being said, I think with him having to carry this team, I don't think that's a recipe for success. Even J.R. Smith, the guy who has been seen as kind of a punk in the past, or a guy who doesn't really care about the team, he even came out and said that the Cavs can't continue to play like they're playing right now and expect to be successful. That can't happen. So, if LeBron does have to carry him all the way to the finals, I think that he may be too fatigued because, like I said earlier, there are two teams in the East who I think that can possibly compete with the Cavaliers in Toronto, and if Boston stays hot under Brad Stevens, they could compete with Cleveland as well. So I think that the Cavs are going to have to find some help. Also, Kyrie's reportedly not happy and things like that. So I think if they can't pull a championship back to Cleveland, or at least make it close, you might see some major changes in Cleveland in the offseason.
All right, so major hypothetical here. You said it, Isaiah. You don't think anybody can touch the Warriors, but if LeBron were able to put the team on his back and lead the Cavaliers to the NBA championship and beat the Warriors, where would this put him on the list of all-time greats, and how would this add to his resume and his narrative that he's created so far?
It'd be huge for him, especially since he beat a team that a lot of people consider better than that Bulls team, who a lot of people say was the best team in NBA history. So it'd be huge for him to say that he carried a team to beat that team. He was the leader on that team. It obviously cements his legacy, I think, as one of the all-time greats. And then also, to bring a championship back to Cleveland, a city that's starved for one, and they're seen as cursed or whatever the deal with that is. But it's huge for the city of Cleveland as well. It also buys that team another year. Like I said before, I think if they don't win it this year, we can look for some changes. Kyrie is reportedly not happy. He's got some other guys who have been seen as kind of undesirables in JR, Amon Shumpert, guys like Delly, who are just kind of guys who just hustle guys, just kind of eat minutes for you. So I think if he can win a championship with this group of guys, that's obviously, I don't think is the best team that he's ever played with. I think that happened down in Miami when he had Wade and Bosh with him, and Ray Allen. They were winning championships down there. But I think that if he's able to win one with this team amid all the stuff that's come out of late about LeBron not being a good finisher, not being able to win games late, and the controversy around the team that's been going on, the swirling around that, I think it'd be huge for him.
Gosh, I want to see him do it. That'd be pretty awesome to see his return to Cleveland. Before he left Cleveland, it was kind of said that he was a great player, but he couldn't quite carry that team. The team just wasn't good enough around him. And after last season, midway through this season, he's getting kind of the same deal. And it would be awesome to see LeBron just do it himself. Obviously the team would be, they're the supporting cast, but I think like you said, LeBron is carrying this team right now. And if there's any way that they can do it, it would be because of him. And I think he wins a championship this year, or even gets him there this year, that puts him among top 3 all-time greats if he's not there already. We talked about the Celtics, we talked about the Cavaliers, we talked about the Raptors, but is there anybody else in the East that could be considered a contender for the for the Eastern Conference Finals?
Maybe Miami, obviously, but with Chris Bosh possibly missing the rest of the season, I don't think that holds too much more weight. You have Hassan Whiteside. They signed Joe Johnson, obviously. You still have Dwayne Wade and Goran Dragic and some other guys who are, effective scorers like that. But I think without Chris Bosh, he really is one of those guys who makes that team go. He can shoot the three. He can take it in. He can beat you inside, beat you outside. So I think without Bosh, that team may not be as good as it could have been, especially after adding Joe Johnson. But the Raptors, I think the Raptors' best basketball is in front of them right now. They've been playing without DeMar Carroll for a good bit of the season. He's expected to be back in the near future and really make an impact for this team. That's the reason they signed him in the offseason, took him away from Atlanta, and took away a little bit of our that bulldog mentality we had. So I think that he could be a guy that comes back, gives Toronto a little bit of a shot in the arm late in the season, and they could make a push for the number one spot and possibly head to the NBA Finals.
All right, guys. So that was, another exciting week of NBA basketball. We got more to come. It's only going to get more exciting in these next few months, especially in April when it really comes down to the wire. I guess, a little quick tidbit on Major League Baseball. The Atlanta Braves played their first spring training game today, and it ended in a 4-4 tie. A very exciting game. I know Isaiah was happy to hear about that. Better than a loss, I guess. Right?
Yeah, better than a loss, but I'd rather have the win.
We didn't have quite enough time to talk some Major League action, but we will next season. We'll fill you in on who we think are the contenders this year and who we think are some of the pretenders. But that's all we got for this week. You got anything, Isaiah?
Nope. Just enjoyed talking to you guys this week. We hope you guys have a great week and get back with us next week.
See you guys.